When there's something strange in your earbuds, who are you gonna call? Nostalgia. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Joe.
Guys, did you ever notice we have a bit of a rhythm to how we do that introduction? Like, for all fans know, we've just been using the same recorded line over and over again for that.
There are little adjustments each time, so I think they all know that we're not robots.
Yeah, if you play them back to back, there's a message.
And for those of you that didn't know, I didn't read the back of the box this time. It doesn't say Nostalgia on the back of the box. But the actual back of the box is really weird. It's just this smorgasbord of things that you can experience in this game, like paranormal activity, the Ghostbusters headquarters, one Marshmallow Man. Like, it just lists those things out.
like a list of ingredients?
Does it, have a conclusion to that? And it all is from Ghostbusters or something like that?
Yeah, you know what, Joe? I'm glad you brought it up so this way I don't have to read the whole list. But it does end with one street map, which is not a good feature to point out. One street map, one Temple of Zool, and a zillion ghosts.
That's also false, but
and
yeah.
Wait a minute, are we aware that our listeners are know that we read the back of the box? Have we ever said this is from the back of the box?
We've mentioned it, and if we haven't, then it's
this is when we're
over
mentioning
100 episodes. You had to have noticed.
The difference is, I use the word fans, not listeners, and our fans would know that. Our listeners, I don't know.
Gotcha, yeah.
Casual listeners of the show probably don't even know, the difference between if this is Mike or Joe talking right now. Anyway.
I don't even know the difference.
Ghostbusters, guys. Before we talk about the video game, can we talk about the movie?
If you want.
I would like to talk about the movie. Joe, why don't you kick us off and talk about your experiences with the Ghostbusters movie?
I really hate that you chose me because I have to embarrassingly say, I know, I've never seen Ghostbusters. I know, everyone. I know, listeners. I'm sorry I let you down.
It's like the Citizen Kane of ghost-busting films.
Yeah, of ghost-busting films. In fact, I think there was another big one that we did that I had not seen, the classic movie. But I can't remember what it was. But yeah, it's a blind spot of mine.
Okay.
Of course, though, growing up in the 90s, after it had already been very popular, I know a lot about it. And, I've seen bits and pieces, but never actually sat down and watched the movie.
Joe, I just have to ask now, because you've opened it up to yourself. What is a lot? What, you know a lot of things about it. Just give me
I know about, I know, a lot of the imagery of, the slime monsters and the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. And I know that he becomes I know if they think about whatever they think about at the end becomes their final enemy, and they're thinking about this Marshmallow Man, and they wear the vacuum packs on their back. They can't cross the streams. All the little references that are
and that Dan Aykroyd has an unhealthy connection to the movie, and he keeps trying to do more with it, but he should just stop.
I didn't know that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but now I do.
And did you also know that the theme song, as catchy as it is, also has some controversy behind it on who actually wrote a Ghostbusters theme song and then it wasn't used and stuff like that?
No, that's another one that's news to me.
Okay, and did you know that there was I don't want to say
two truths and a lie, and one of these isn't going to be true.
I don't want to say but this. I think the craziest thing for me, if we're as we're talking about the movie, is just the extended canon of the movie beyond just this one blockbuster hit. The fact that Ghostbusters in the late 80s was on the scale of popularity as say the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The fact that it became a brand and a franchise is just you don't hear about that, right? It just kind of vanished.
Yeah, I guess I'm aware that level of fandom exists, and that's bigger than a lot of other Back to the Future was another blockbuster movie, but did not reach this level of cult fandom that I feel
I would say that it has, but
you think so? But with having TV series and I feel like
merchandise. The merchandise is crazy in Ghostbusters. Everybody wants the ectomobile to play with for themselves. They want to have the different ghosts catching gear stuff, which is like just vacuums, really, right?
And where like Back to the Future had its 3 movies and was very, very popular, but then like that was really it, right? I mean, maybe I'm completely wrong. Until like maybe 30 years later, there was like a video game or something, but like it had. And I'm sure there's a video game on the NES, but
we're not here to argue about Back to the Future,
right? But I'm just using that as like as a comparison to how I feel like Ghostbusters have something I haven't seen. I'm still like very aware of it. I think because it's just got so like overly popular.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing there, and I think maybe a better example is like Indiana Jones, which also got like a bunch of like young Indiana Jones and like the gear. Maybe Back to the Future didn't take off because like those self-tying shoes just weren't possible and the hoverboard wasn't possible. So like it's possible. Always like consumer products that push things over the edge in these scenarios. So Ghostbusters must have been something easy to be like, well, you can dress up like one, you can own replica gear, and no one's actually going to be able to catch a ghost in their whole life, so might as well make them think they can. But, I think it's about time we talk about the game, because just to give a quick overview on this game, a lot of people know this game infamously for like the bad spelling errors in the ending and like maybe the fact that it gets really difficult towards the end. But what I found interesting as someone who had never played the game before is that you're not playing like as the official Ghostbusters in like some kind of action platformer where you're fighting ghosts like you might expect. You're doing a Ghostbusters business simulator.
Yeah. I had never actually heard of this game. I did not know that it had the reputation that it does. So I was completely taken aback by everything that it seems to be converting from the movie to the game. Like, was there a lot of like worrying about making rent in Ghostbusters? It's been so long since I've seen it.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember that side of it. And I'm not, like they were well-to-do, like they had a headquarters and stuff like that. So that wasn't the problem. I think it's really interesting instead that they chose to like take what could have been a very simple, straightforward, like game similar to the vein of, Super Mario Brothers, just with the Ghostbusters and you just, fight ghosts on, or actually imagine like Contra, but for Ghostbusters, like you could have done that.
Well, that's sort of what I was worried about, because in the more modern, not modern, but like the mid-aughts, the late 90s, when you got like a movie tie-in game or something along those lines, it was usually just going to be a reskin of a very successful genre that it's very easy to make. But like the tie-in games that we've played have all had a much more unique design to them, and this is included in that. But while that's always interesting in itself, I was not expecting when I pop in Ghostbusters to immediately have to go to the store to buy equipment, and then I run out of gas on the way there. So then the Ghostbusters have to push it to the gas station, and then I forgot something at the HQ, which is very strange.
And Sean, I think you gave just a good overview of the game actually there, because essentially that is the gameplay loop of like travel around New York City, purchase the necessary equipment for whatever you need at the moment, visit haunted places, capture ghosts, and repeat it. Just keep making more money to buy better gear. It's like, who would have thought that a Ghostbusters game would have a loot system?
Yeah, this is like not grinding in a video game sense, but this is like the grind LLC, like just like that's what this game is doing. It's like this is what it's like to own a small business. And
there's some nice touches that just completely to me are unnecessary. For instance, the gas station with the fuel gauge, and like if you run out of gas at any particular point, you have to get out of the car and push it to the nearest gas station. Or you can just visit the gas station and have a full tank. I don't know about you guys. I just thought it was easier to just run out of gas and have them push the car.
Yeah, because you still have to drive to and expend gas going to the gas station. So if you're already low, you're probably not going to make it. I don't know. Just weird that we have to talk about the strategy of gas consumption in the Ghostbusters game.
Yeah, I think it's a case of them trying to make it like, oh, make it realistic and make it like it would really be to a fault, where it's just like, well, now there's a lot of things that are just not fun in here. Like that, it's like, this is what I'm trying to get away from by playing a video game. And I'm sure most people playing this were not driving cars, but it's like chores.
Yeah, the overview of the game is like it plops you down onto a very realistic map of Manhattan, and you don't. It's not like you're driving your car. It's more like you're pointing a Ghostbusters cursor around streets,
which isn't exactly clear, right? Like, you've never had that mechanic introduced to you before, and there's no explanation of what to do first. So to just have that ghost with the sensor sign through it as like that's you wasn't exactly clear.
Yeah. And what you're doing is you're going around and waiting. You're going towards buildings, and if those buildings blink, that means there's a ghost in there. And when you try and select the first one you come across, you'll find out that you didn't bring any of your equipment, and in fact, you don't own any equipment.
Yeah, that was the funny part. It's like, you don't even own the equipment. This is your first ever mission.
You go to the store and you buy the equipment, or what you think you need, and then maybe you forgot something else, and then you have to go back. But then once you finally get your stuff, after you've driven to the store, expended gas, get your stuff, then you finally can go to the blinking locations and catch some ghosts. And it's always just like on the facade of the building, like they're just ghosts running around, and you drop your trap, and it's actually that's a fun little piece of it, like the whole ghost catching part. But and if you cross the streams, you die, and that's cute. And you just keep doing this to make money, and every time you catch a ghost, you make some money, and that's 80% of the game, or like 90% of the game.
I think you did a great job there, Sean, of covering that. I'd like to just take a step back from everything before we go into explaining the whole game, and just start at like square one for a minute with both of you. If you can both talk about, like, did you look at the manual at all? Like, what were your first thoughts when playing this game of what you should do, or where, like what was even happening on the screen? Because if you don't look at the manual, it's not exactly clear. Yeah. So Joe, what did you do first?
I didn't look at the manual until a little later. So when I first turned this on, and I had heard that this is like notorious for being like a little bit of a janky game. When I first turned this on, I thought that this overworld map was the game, and I thought like, wow, this game was made in an hour. Like, I thought it was this overworld map with this cursor, these ghosts are just flying around, and I was like, what am I even doing here? It felt like it was like, what was that early system, was like Magnavox or whatever, where like you put literally like a clear sheet on your screen that had move around. Like, it felt like I had to use my imagination. Oh, the Odyssey, that's what it is. And then then once I realized, oh, there's a shop and I can go into these buildings. The manual explains it a little better. But then I was like, okay, maybe there is something a little more to it. But that was like, when I first turned it on, I was like, what am I looking at here? It's just like a perfectly square grid with like buildings that have like, they're like cut out in squares that just like look.
It looks like Sim City.
It looks like they've been like cropped or selected with squares and put there, like, and not like actually cut out to the shape of the building. And
yeah, I read the manual before I played, and it's good, because if I were in your situation, like this game, you need to read the manual to even understand concepts. Like, it's still not a very good job of describing what you should be doing, but at least if you read the manual, you kind of know the phases that you'll go through.
Right.
Because when I was in like the ghost busting phase, even though I had read the manual, I could not for the life of me catch one. Like, I could grab them, but then the whole thing would just end and I wouldn't make any money. So I had to like watch some videos to see what I was doing wrong. So yeah, it was frustrating even if you had read the manual.
Yeah, and just to one more point on the manual, it's like not written in like the most intuitive way that we're used to reading. Like, instead of saying like, okay, you have the city map scene, here are the controls for the city map scene, here are the controls for the the road scene, it says like the A button And then underneath it says, on the city map scene, it does this. On the shop scene, it does this. On the road scene, it does this. On the building scene, it does this. There's like 7 of these scenes. Then it says B button, and it lists, like, it's backwards. We're used to seeing, like, what all the controls do in this section, what all the controls do in that section. Now it just says, like, A button, and then lists the sections. So if you're looking at, like, how do you control things on the road scene? You got to look at the A button under the A button column and find road scene, and then find out what it does. And then to the B button column, find road scene and find out what it does. It's just not like that's a huge deal, but it's weird.
My wild guess is that it saved paper instead of having like 5 illustrations of the controller.
Right.
It's like, I'm just gonna list them all here.
But then even for when it's talking about the arrows, it's even worse, because then it just says up arrow. At city map scene, moves Ghostbusters up. At road scene, increases your car's speed. It's just like a sentence after up arrow that explains what it does in each section.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Strange.
And it's kind of funny that, like, you know, since we're talking about the start of the game, you're not the actual Ghostbusters. You're the franchised version of the Ghostbusters in, like, in your local town, and you've been loaned $10,000 to start your own Ghostbusters franchise.
And that's how they describe it. It's the franchise. And again, it's been a long time since I've watched the movie, but is it assumed? Is it, like, implied that this is, like, a huge corporation that you could just get a franchise for? Oh man. Yeah.
And I don't know, like, the manual, I will agree, Joe, that it's all over the place in terms of, like, explaining things to you. Even they explain them as, like, different ideas too. Like, so they're right off the bat, you learn about gearing up and then busting ghosts, but then it goes right to Zool too, and it's like there's so many other things that would happen before you get to Zool that it feels like they should have, like, thought about this chronologically. But they did have a great strategy tip section at the end that just feels like it should have been communicated somewhere throughout the game too. But I guess, like, the manual was the only way they could have done it back then. But one thing I never understood was that the more time you spend on the city map scene, regardless of where you're going, that means that it's going to take more time for you to drive from point A to point B, regardless of where you pick.
Yeah, it basically. Well, I don't know if it's a time thing. I think it's just wherever the last square you were at, and it's how close it is to the next square you're going to.
See, it says in the manual, the more you explore, the more mileage you'll have to travel when you take to the streets. So don't waste time exploring the city map scene.
Interesting.
It sounds like whichever, like, little curves you go through as the cursor, that then, like, determines the length of how long your driving scene is going to be.
Yeah, I guess it would end up being the same regardless. The whole way that they have this stuff connected is all very strange, because you have this timer, this, like, reverse timer, but you don't know what it's counting up to, and you don't know what the triggers for like the last phase of the game are. I don't know if we wanted to talk about that at all.
So you're talking about that PK energy thing, right? That counts up?
That eventually lets you into the jewel building, like where they manufacture jewel pods.
So I took that counter to mean that, like, those ghosts that are coming up on the screen that are, like, going towards Zool, that, like, that's that's just always going to count up as those ghosts on the overworld thing, whatever we want to call it, the hub.
And
as those get closer,
it is quantifying the amount of ghosts. But since it's, like, a count up, and it doesn't seem to be like there's no information of, like, oh, when it hits this will happen. It's just like the number keeps going up, and then at some random number it'll, like, unlock Zool.
Right. Or yeah, you don't even know because instead it just automatically decides to tell you, like, on the bottom of your screen, enter Zool building. And that's, like, pretty ominous.
Well, is there even, like, what I was confused on is there, because of that counter, that energy counter, is there, like, what's your incentive to really be going and and catching ghosts? I mean, I guess
money.
Yeah, you need better equipment.
Yeah, better equipment that'll help you against Zool or in the Zool building.
Because like one of the things you can buy at the store that is useful in the building is like $100,000. So the first time the door unlocks, you may just ignore it anyway because you want to grab that thing to make it a bit easier.
Yeah, it's funny because at first, when you first hit the store, and you only have $10,000, it's kind of obvious what you should buy, but you can still make mistakes. But then it's also kind of funny to think, like, wow, look at all these other items, like that sound generator for $100,000. Like, I wonder what that's gonna do for me once I get $100,000. You know, because that's a bit of a grind in this game.
Yeah.
And then to find out all it does is just slow down the ghosts in one particular section of the game. Feels like, you know, that sound generator could have done a bunch of things for a bunch of different scenes. You know, it could have made it easier to, like, detect cars coming out of the way, or, like, generate so this way the ghosts come towards you in the ghost busting scenes, you know? Like, for $100,000 to only do one thing in one scene, that's, like, an added problem to all of these store items. They only have, like, one particular use that's only useful for a specific scene.
Mm-hmm.
And you can only carry 4 at a time, right?
You can only carry 4, that's correct. I mean, I think you can stack some, like if you bought a bunch of the traps, but anybody that knows how to play this game just gets the super trap or whatever.
Yeah, well, we should talk about that because I didn't know that at first, and I bought those capture traps, which I believe you can buy 2 or 3 of. And when you buy the capture trap, it captures the ghosts for you, and, you know, however many you catch in a scene. There's always 4 ghosts on a ghost busting scene, and then you have to kind of line up your beam so this way they catch all of them and then they go directly into the trap. There's just really, like, it's really unintuitive and more like just go up as high as you can to the screen and then just set it as wide of a net as you possibly can. And it's like the ghosts aren't going to come down any further, so you might as well just set it as high as you can. Am I wrong there?
That makes sense. I don't think I spent too much time deciding what the depth value was for it.
Right, so you have the capture trap, and then I was trying to figure out, like, well, what's wrong? I have multiple capture traps, what's going on? And it turns out that you have to go back to the Ghostbusters headquarters if your capture traps are full, but not if your super trap is full, because that can just hold, like, every single time it resets.
And there is no communication there as to what's actually happening at the Ghostbusters HQ, because it just looks like more people are getting crammed into the clown car. It's not like you're not seeing ghosts come out. It's just so I didn't even know what it was for, even though I had read the manual. I thought I had to go and buy more capture traps.
That's funny too. Yeah, you releasing them there, but that's true. They don't actually explain that to you. And am I wrong in thinking that the Ghostbusters headquarters as a place to go is just a completely missed opportunity, considering that it's only used as a thing for a temporary power-up that then eventually becomes useless after, like, you know, if you're pretty good at this game, after 3 ghost-busting attempts, you can afford the super trap, assuming you didn't buy it right away.
Yeah, I was disappointed. I thought it was going to be, like, a home base sort of thing, in just, like, a thing that you would want to go back there every once in a while. But yeah, it's kind of useless.
So there's a couple of game overs opportunities throughout the game that aren't exactly, like, as clear, because, you know, you don't really have, say, a health bar of sorts until you get to the Zool part of the game. So the out of business in the manual, at least the way they describe it, is, and I never thought of this one, but if you run out of gas and have no money in your account to buy fuel, then your franchise is out of business, and you've
Makes
lost.
Sense.
If you touch the ghost on the stairs 3 times, that just seems like a weird stipulation for, like, you know, like, considering you don't see the health bar and you don't actually, like, those ghosts touching you on the stairs don't read as hits. Only the third one actually.
If we're going to talk
like,
about the building part, we'd have to like talk about the entire building part.
Sure. But just to continue on here, the Marshmallow Man appears on the city map scene, and you have less than $10,000. That's an automatic game over.
Yeah, I don't really know what the $10,000 is supposed to be for. Is it like a bribe?
Do you bribe him? Yeah.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you, I feel like I missed a lot of these things, and I mean, I never saw the Marshmallow Man. I never went to HQ. I did like 3 or 4 ghost things. I only bought like the super trap. I didn't buy any of the extra stuff, and then I went to Zool.
You must have went to Zool as soon as they told you.
I did, I did, and then I was like, "Screw this!" Like when I got there.
So you didn't catch any ghosts?
No, I caught ghosts before Zool. Yeah, I caught a bunch of ghosts. That was like the only part that I felt like I was like playing much of a game, and I drove. I drove to the shop a few times. Yeah. Got money, but I didn't like all the other stuff to buy. I mean, I ended up like not really buying any of it because 1, I wasn't sure what any of it did, and 2, it was like I wasn't even sure how to like use some of the stuff. Like once I would buy something, I could equip those like 4 things, and then I wasn't trying to switch them out, and then I just kind of gave up and kept playing. But I like realized that I felt like I was doing fine without any of that. Now it makes sense that like probably would have done a lot better on that Zool level, which seemed absolutely impossible to me without any other equipment. So maybe other equipment made it easier for you guys, but
sure.
Not to keep like jumping ahead to the Zool building, but
it's the best part of the game.
Oh yeah.
It's the worst of times and the best of times.
You know, there is one out of business stipulation for the game to end that I think is pretty strange, and it says you can go out of business if you destroy Gozer with your powerful beam and save civilization. So that implies that at the end of the game, after you destroy Gozer, that you've done such a good job getting, like, Gozer's like the final ghost, and now there's no more ghosts to bust, and you're out of business. So you should
really
kept
you
quiet.
shouldn't have done that.
I didn't read it that way, because like the subtitle is the game ends in one of 6 ways, and I guess and you go out of business if there's no more money to be made. So yeah,
so it's a loss.
Yeah, it's all a loss. You need to keep Gozer, otherwise there's no reason to exist.
One final question about this whole like hub thing, and you know, just the idea of a Ghostbusters business simulator. I know that we talked a little bit about this, but what are some other ways that you imagined a Ghostbusters game going down?
Well, I'll say that this isn't something I imagined beforehand, but based on what I saw here, I thought of a way I think I would have enjoyed this game more, is if it was really just focused around the ghost busting levels and making them a little more interesting, where like you could probably use that little beam mechanic and catching, or stream mechanic, catching things in the stream and like aiming the stream in a certain way, catching ghosts as like a little bit of a puzzle mechanic if you designed the levels that way. Like I feel like that's an interesting gameplay mechanic that was completely not utilized in this game, but I wouldn't mind seeing a game that was like catching ghosts in different areas and trying to catch certain ghosts with other ghosts, while, you know, different ways to utilize that like magnetized line that, you know, that they're using in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there are like a dozen or so of these of Ghostbusters video games. I've never played any of them, but whenever I think of like what's the best way for Ghostbusters to be a video game, it's just Luigi's Mansion, and that's like the only thing that I can think of, because the only game that sort of feels like it that I know of. But I did not expect it to take this turn.
Yeah, and speaking of unexpected turns, so the part that we've been waiting to talk about here is the Zool, Z-U-U-L, when you have to enter that stage. It's unlike any scene that we've seen before, and I think, you know, right away, the easiest thing to talk about is just the mechanics behind it. But Sean, why don't you give us like a cursory view of what you're supposed to do before talking about why it's so bad?
Yeah. So what you're supposed to do in Zool level part A is just walk up 22 flights of stairs while dodging ghosts. But it has a very interesting controller layout, which I guess we can get into. It's really just walking upstairs. But instead of just pressing left or right or up. You have to press left or right or up while also mashing the A button, which is the button to take steps. And I don't know why they had to make it that complicated or that hard, because I feel like it would have been hard on its own, just trying to navigate around these ghosts. But it only makes sense to try this if you have a turbo, because if you don't have a turbo button, I feel like there's no way to get past this level. I mean, yeah, you can have the sound thing that costs $100,000, or you can have the ghost repellent suit, which gives you a couple more hits from these ghosts. But it's such a frustrating mechanic that I've never seen before. If you guys want to take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely weird. Because you stand there for a second, like not even sure if you can move. Like it's weird. You have to end up just rapidly jamming A. It's stupid.
So here's the weird thing: you feel paralyzed because you're holding the directional button, to move them, but nothing's happening. But then if you just try your buttons, nothing exactly happens either, because you have to also be like selecting the direction you want to go in as you're like rapidly tapping the A button. So it's this weird combination of like putting your controller to the works. Like, again, other than a turbo controller, I'm not quite sure how you would be able to hit your thumb that fast, knowing that you can't.
22 floors.
Right. 22 is the crazy number to me, which the manual is very comfortable about. Once inside, you'll need to climb the stairs to the 22nd floor. You would think that that's just like an exaggeration thing, like, oh, you'll get to the 22nd floor thing.
Or you go up and then you get to an elevator.
Yeah, to actually like climb each of those with this mechanic of mashing the A button. And we're not talking about like you just got a message that said, come to Zool's stage, or enter Zool's stage or whatever. And you get there, and then the Ghostbusters are actually like tiptoeing their way every single time you press the A button. It's not there. At least if they were like running, or if there was a mechanic where you had to do like A-B to do the running. Like track and field.
Track and field.
I think A and B would have at least been better, because then you could set the controller down and just kind of hit rapidly with your index fingers, to the point I was trying to make with having the directional pad as well and not having it locked to a certain direction, is that you have to hold the controller in a way that doesn't really give your thumb a lot of access to move rapidly.
Yeah, I mean, if you were just to do that A-B thing, you would not be able to navigate around, because there's a lot of sort of shimmying left and shimmying right just to avoid these ghosts.
Unless you were just like on a track where it's like the A-B automatically takes you to the you don't have to use the directional keys at all, or whatever, directional buttons.
Yeah, because it's not enough punishment to climb 22 floors by pressing the A button this amount of times. The other part is that these ghosts are coming after you randomly, by the way. They don't actually have like heat-seeking detection on you or anything, right? They just kind of like mosey about on the stage, and you have to pray that they don't accidentally bump into you.
And they move so randomly that like it's not designed in a way that like, oh, if you're just skillful enough, you can get there without being touched once. It's random movement, and no matter where you are on the screen, there's a chance they're just going to surround you they're not even looking to surround you. It just happens.
Right. And then with 22 floors worth of it, the odds that will happen are like almost 100%. Like, at that point, it's like, of course it's going to happen at some point. You're going to be on this stage. I mean, how long do you think it takes straight to just get up those 22 floors if you don't die? I mean, it's still like a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to hide behind something here and pretend like, oh, this was grueling, but I got through it. This is actually where I just said it wasn't worth it to see Gozer or the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man or whatever happens next, because I did not want to find out, even with the turbo button, I did not want to find out what happened after this.
Yeah, I would have done the same thing, but I just cheated so I could get to the last area. And that's just rough in its own ways.
Now, can we just think about it from a design point here for a Ghostbusters video game. We've talked about the first half of this game, the business simulator part of it, and how weird that is, right? Like the idea of controlling the Ghostbusters in that kind of way where you have to manage financials and ghosts are about catching money and stuff, which, to be fair, they are a business in the movie too, so I get the connection. But here, this second part now, they've done it wrong again. What should have just been an easy way to just navigate the big building while you avoid ghosts and stuff like that. They've done it wrong again. So why does this game continue to just choose the hard way to make a video game?
It feels like they're just trying to make the most unique experience that they can, whether that means it's going to be fun or not. Because I will give it to them that this is a unique combination of gameplay elements, with no comment of how good the experience is itself.
I had to look into the man behind the madness here and just see what was going through his thought process in terms of game design. And David Crane, David Crane is actually the maker of the PC version of the game, which is what all these ports. It's all over the place. This Ghostbusters game, it's on pretty much anything. That's what it's based on. Is this first PC game, and he actually gives a very long, solid answer on what advice he would give to game designers. Would you guys like to hear?
I would love to.
Absolutely.
Here's a tip for game designers I like to call how to deal with a tight deadline.
Okay.
Complete a full game as quickly as possible. And then go back and enhance until they pry the code from your hands. After that, stop, capital letters, adding features, and only fix bugs, or you'll simply fall victim to creeping elegance. Give your game a beginning, middle, and an end. If the code release deadline comes and all you have is a fully playable and beautifully tweaked main game, all of your work is commercially worthless. That game can't be released. Implement the complete game flow from the time the player boots up until the final congratulations screen, which is funny if you think about it. Do this first, even if the fun part, the main gameplay sequence, is nothing but a placeholder. Second, make the game really fun, but leave out neat little enhancements that might take a day or two to the code. Then, in the last week of the project, revisit each part of the sequence based on greatest need and add those cool little ideas that have been percolating in your brain. The result is that near the end of the allocated time, you have an average but complete game that has at least some commercial value. But since everybody knows that a great game sells better than an average game, you now have the leverage to show your publisher that you can improve the game with each subsequent day they can give you.
So this guy thinks he's got it figured out.
Yeah, this is like, I feel like he shouldn't be saying this, revealing his secret there.
What is
I
saying?
love that it's like, it kind of implies that it's a good thing to not, I know this isn't exactly what you're saying, but that's a good thing to not give your best game so you can still show them that you could make it better if they give you more time next time.
Yeah, I do understand some of the philosophies here.
Me too.
But I'm not quite sure he ever got past the part where he said, make the game as quickly as possible.
Even if it's just a placeholder.
Right, even if it's just a placeholder. I feel like that was the timeline for this project, Ghostbusters.
Oh, man. What a mess.
I love that quote because so many times we get confusing, they could have meant anything, and this guy lays it all out for you.
This is the most matter-of-fact representation of game development in the 80s that I have ever heard.
It's also probably the most honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually like the idea, and this happens. Everybody does this, at some point. But the idea of make something good, not great, within the timeline, and then tell them it can be great if I get a couple more days. Now the problem is you will never get those days, right? The company wants to ship things as soon as they can.
But it almost feels like it could be like a future proofing thing where it's like, but next time, know that if you gave me more time, I could make something better.
Yes. So I think for 1980s standards, that's a pretty detailed game designer headspace that we've just entered.
Yeah.
All right, so Sean, you cheated your way through, which is fine because thankfully now we can continue the podcast. What happens next? I'm dying to know.
So what happens next is we are greeted by what is pretty much just what we have been trudging through all these months, and it turns out that all this time Ghostbusters has just been a shmup, and it's a very placid and you're not moving much kind of shmup, but you get to the final boss battle with what's her name and the two doggies, which are gatekeeper, keymaster, all that stuff, and you have to shoot them with ectobolts or whatever, and there's two screens, one of which has the actual boss on it, and the other one you can see the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man just sort of slowly crawling up the building. It's got a crawl gauge as well on the side.
Does he look good?
He looks like the character. Yeah.
That's important because I think that's an iconic imagery thing, and if they made him look really shitty in 8-bit, I would have been upset.
Yeah, there's no animation on the other three though. They just sort of stand there and bullets come out of them, and there's some ghosts flying around that get in your way. It's not fun. It's also very frustrating, and you move very slowly. But that is the final boss.
And is that still in that shmup layout that you were talking about, as weird as it could be, or is that back to the ghost busting catching scene?
Oh no, that is entirely just sort of the top down shoot forward until you get all their hit points gone, and then you go to the congratulations scene.
Yeah, so that congratulations scene has a lot of hype around the internet. It's definitely known as one of the most infamous ending screens of all time. It says, "Congratulations, you have completed a great game and proved the justice of our culture. Now go and rest our heroes." I should mention that it's white text on black with nothing else.
Yeah, and I know that the congratulations and the misspellings and stuff, and considering it a great game, that's what gets the attention. But the statement, "You have proved the justice of our culture," is the most bizarre to me.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what does that mean?
I don't know. It seems oddly fascist. I'm not sure.
Yeah, this is this is in the time of the Cold War, right? So you have this whole democracy wins again.
Are you saying that all ghosts are communists? I'm just confused.
Well, they're not like us.
So they must be.
So they're against us, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The funniest part for me about this, for what it's worth, is, and I think everything Sean said is spot on. The misspellings are funny. The fact that it's considered a great game, that's all funny. But what's funny to me is that this is not a translation error. A Japanese team didn't work on this, and then when they translated it, this is what happened. If you play Ghostbusters on the Famicom, it actually just goes straight to black. There is no congratulations screen.
But are these misspellings on the original David Crane version?
So, that's a good question. I don't have that answer in front of me, but I'm going to guess no, actually. I'm going to say that they were not, and that Activision or, whoever, Activision made the game. So, whoever's within that made the mistake here when they added this in. But it is weird that it's not in the Famicom version.
Yeah. I mean, this version, has a full credit sequence where everyone has a fun nickname. So I imagine they are all Japanese names, so it had to have been translated in Japan at some point.
Right, and maybe for all we know, the game was done in Japan, but the Japanese they never like to do the whole credits thing. So the credits are just not existent in their version. It just goes straight to black and starts you at the next screen again to start over. But maybe they did, when working to port it over, they put that code back in or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. It is weird because apparently through some patchwork or something like that, you can get the congratulation and all that to show up in the Famicom version, but with the added pleasure of having great be spelt wrong too. Great is now spelled Grate.
Perfect.
Oh, this is a different kind of great.
Yes, yeah. a great game, a game used for greats.
A game that you grate.
You know, and I think it's funny that, like, we've seen some bad endings, right, in our NES games so far. But this one, as bad as it is, it's also one that I imagine not many people see. Right? Like, no one's really climbing up those 22 floors to begin with.
Yeah, I feel like it's probably all seen on YouTube.
It's my biggest problem with it is, like, you know, it sucks that it's just this white text on black background, but when you defeat the boss, it's not even like you get a cool death animation. It looks like they replace the bitmap with just like white noise. There's not like an explosion. It's just like, here's gray and you did it. It's really disappointing.
Well, maybe it's supposed to be disappointing because you're out of business now.
Mm-hmm.
You've completed a great game. You're financially ruined.
Yeah.
You do not have the keys to the city. Good day. You were talking about music there at the end, though, Sean, but we never talked about the fact that, like, the Ghostbusters theme song is in this game.
Oh, yeah. It's totally in this game.
It's all over this game.
It is the game.
It's honestly, for me at least, it's good to be in there, but it's funny how even a great song like that, you know, like, it'd be the equivalent of the Star Wars theme being in an 8-bit version of Star Wars and just looping the dun 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 dun, you know, like if they just loop that one part over again and again, eventually you'd say this was nice of them to do this, but they really only had to do this for like the main menu.
Yeah, no, it becomes like the swan song of your sanity if you play this game long enough, because it's literally just wallpaper from the moment you press start to the moment the game ends. The song is playing, and you'll think that a new song is starting because it's just the intro to the song again, but it sounds a little different. But then the meat of the song starts again. It's very frustrating.
I do have a stray thought, and this I think is a particularly good pause sound. It's particularly interesting pause sound, which makes for a good section here on the podcast. Where did you guys pause it at all?
I didn't know I could.
Right,
I paused it, but I turned the music and everything off by that point.
Gotcha. Well, so the start button does not pause it. The select button pauses it, first of all. But second of all, when you pause it, you might pause it and it'll just stop. No sound at all. But depending on whether or not a note was starting in the song or not, if you pause it on the beginning of a note, there's like 50-50 chance, that note will just hold.
Oh, Jesus.
It'll just hold, like it's just like a screech of whatever note it is of that, like 8, whatever you call that, like chip tune one note forever until you unpause it.
It's a sine wave.
Yeah. So that was like, that just felt like, it shows to me that there's like a lot was overlooked in this game. Like that would never be intentional. Like it sounds awful.
Yeah. No thought of like, maybe this will be annoying.
Right. I don't think it was, I think it was just like, I know nothing about programming, but I think it was just like they forgot to do something to make it so that doesn't happen.
And so for the sequels and spin-offs here, you know, I'm not going to get too detailed into it. There's obviously, as we alluded to in the beginning of the episode, there's a whole Ghostbusters franchise for you kids to explore, you know, with the comics and the TV series and the other movies. There's a Ghostbusters 2. I hear it's okay, but I've never bothered to watch it. There's also a all-female Ghostbusters that was received.
Received.
So, yeah. You know, it depends on who reviewed it, honestly, to determine how it comes out. But just in terms of the video games, Ghostbusters 2 will come to us on the NES. So I will have to, even if I don't watch the movie, we'll have to play the game.
True. We'll get there.
Do you guys think it's going to be kind of the same deal? Or I don't know if like a different developer gets their hands on it.
No,
like,
I have to imagine it's going to be different. I can only hope.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be different.
This wasn't successful, right? I mean,
Joe, it had the name Ghostbusters
that's
on
true,
it, and it was
wasn't
sold
successful,
at stores.
All things considered. It wasn't successful, like on a scale, like taking into account that it is Ghostbusters.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're getting at, but I'm just saying, like, let's not sound like we're too young. We all had that experience when we were kids of like going to Toys R Us, and you didn't have the internet, so you had to just buy based on the box art, and stuff like that, and you just had to go with your gut. And that's how you buy games like Sylvester and Tweety on the Game Boy, and you just never play it. You go home and you just never touch it.
I mean, completely. The games, Sean, that you were talking about like movie franchise games that are just reskins of other games. I mean, I had a million of those, and most of them were pretty bad, with like a few very rare exceptions.
But that didn't like become the rule until after these games were made. So I imagine Ghostbusters would be pretty appetizing if I were a kid in the '80s browsing the game section.
But do you notice any parallels here? And maybe it's just that they're both movies, but I'm thinking about like E.T., the Atari 2600 video game that like crashed the market, and then games like Ghostbusters, not just singling out Ghostbusters, but game like Ghostbusters. Like, what is it about movie franchises and video game franchises becoming movies? Like, what is it about the vice versa? Why don't those mediums like translate well at all?
Well, I think at least for movies becoming video games is because the primary goal can easily become like, we need to take this movie and make it into a video game, instead of like, we need to make a good video game and somehow tie it into the movie. Where it's like,
oh yeah,
so like adding things like having to drive to your headquarters is like, well, I guess that would make sense if you were a Ghostbuster, but like, think about what's good gameplay, and I think that might get lost sometimes.
No, I mean, these games are only made because the department of the studio that makes the movie wants some good merchandising, and the game is just merchandise. And so that's why most movie video games don't really turn out that well. And the other way around, if you're talking about why
I am,
why movies based on video games don't really work that well, is because depending on what era of the video game movie we're talking about, usually just because there isn't enough respect given to the video game, and that's more of like the early days. And on the other side of the coin, like more recent video game movies, it's just that like most stories in video games are more like television shows or books in the way that they tell their story, because you're spending so much time with them that you can't really fit it all into one movie. So that's just my opinion on that. But when we're talking about movie video games in the 80s, they are just merchandise.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a great point there, Sean, that it's interesting that nobody, Sony hasn't tried with any of their first-party titles to, like, make a TV series out of, like, Uncharted or The Last of Us.
Yeah.
It seems weird, but I'm sure there's a good reason for it. But obviously, movies make a ton, too. But that Uncharted movie has been in development for, like, what now, 12 years?
Yeah. I also think that movies have borrowed so much from television and film that there really doesn't... In the
video
games, yeah, I'm sorry. Games have borrowed so much from film and television in the way that they present themselves nowadays that there really isn't a need for there to be a television show. When if you're playing Last of Us, like, these cutscenes are kind of Hollywood quality in their cinematography and in their voice acting and all of that fun stuff. So there's less of an itch. I want to see that as a movie. It's already a movie.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then having it as a movie, you're taking away a lot of time, and you're taking away a layer of engagement that you have. I think you get more connected to characters in video games because you're playing as them, and because you're literally like living and dying with them. And then it's kind of just a matter of like, what does a movie add to it? And usually the movie subtracts from it. Like, literally is subtracting a layer of engagement. Like, you're not playing it.
Yeah. The only video game movie, it's very hard to tell the difference. The only movie that I've seen that is based on a video game that I have actually really enjoyed for all the wrong reasons was Silent Hill. And that's only because it was fan service for most of it. It's like, that's the actual music. And like, those are the actual, like, enemy models. Like, it wasn't because it was a good movie at all. So, yeah, you're not watching them for the same reasons.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but there's I actually have no appetite to see Sonic the Hedgehog, Super Mario Brothers, Super Smash Brothers, Legend of Zelda. I don't have any appetite to watch those things on film. I want the next Legend of Zelda game. I don't want to see the next Legend of Zelda movie.
Yeah, I would trade every piece of Silent Hill media that is outside of video games just for one more real game.
That was beautiful, Sean. Real fast, let me walk you through what we're not going to play, since we are going to play Ghostbusters 2, if you remember way back like an hour ago when we were talking about sequels and spinoffs. We're also not going to play the real Ghostbusters. I think it's weird that they made that the title of the game, the real Ghostbusters, implying that they know that you just franchised out this company in the NES game, and now you get to play as, like, Bill Murray for real this time.
Oh, is this the cartoon?
I don't know what this is, but it was released on the arcades in 1987, and I don't know if the cartoon got out that fast.
I'm looking at the Wikipedia page for the real Ghostbusters, and it seems that the primary piece of media called the real Ghostbusters was a animated television show that ran from September of 86 to October of 91.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing that too now, so that's pretty crazy that they got the animated series out that fast. But that just goes to show you that, like, they knew Ghostbusters was going to be a hit. All of these things were planned. Yeah, it was all planned. So that's what the real Ghostbusters is. Sorry, Ghostbusters fans listening to this episode. I don't know anything about the Ghostbusters other than that the first movie is pretty good. There's this whole line of Extreme Ghostbusters, too. Sean, do you want to see if that's animated?
There's
like 8 Extreme Ghostbusters games.
I'm looking at it right now. It was in 97. I think that's all it lasted.
There you go. So there's a whole line of Extreme Ghostbusters games. Then finally in 2009, a Ghostbusters game based on, like with the Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd characters from the original movie. They come in as a full video game, and apparently it's very, very good. I never played it, but I heard lots of good things about it. It's not taking many cues from this NES game, but it does have on like a TV somewhere the congratulation screen is like seen if you like look for it.
That's good, but so you're saying that there's no, like, you don't have to balance the books at Ghostbusters HQ then, not in this game?
Right. Okay. That's my understanding. I mean, I'm sure there's money involved, but it's not like the idea is running a business in Ghostbusters 2009.
Yeah.
It's much more of like an action adventure game with levels, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there was a really bad Ghostbusters game in 2016 just called Ghostbusters. So that's confusing because in 2009 there was a good one that came out. So in 2016 there was a bad one that came out. So what would you do in 2019? Well, why don't you just re-release the other one called Ghostbusters? Surely nobody will be confused, especially if you refer to it as like remastered. They won't think you're remastering the game from just 3 years ago. They'll know that you're remastering the 2009 Ghostbusters game and not the 1988 NES Ghostbusters game. So that's where I stand on all this stuff. I'm kind of glad that we don't have to play too many of these Ghostbusters games, but I'm sure for Ghostbusters fans, any additions to the lore must have been fun and well.
For sure.
And one thing that's for sure, Sean, is that we are for sure going to do our votes for the Essential Games list.
Okay, real quick. I just think it's funny that I'm on the Wikipedia page for the Ghostbusters video game, and it shows it's like what the awards that it was nominated for. And so for the Spike Video Game Awards, Bill Murray was nominated but did not win Best Performance by a Human Male.
Oh my god! What else is there? Best performance by an AI robot? Like,
I don't know. It's just so weird.
That's so funny. By a human male. You're gonna buy this game later today, aren't you?
Not today, but I'll think about it.
Okay, we are gonna go in order of Ghostbusters knowledge for these. So, Joe, you will go first. Give us your vote for the Essential Games list on Ghostbusters for the NES.
Not going to be a big surprise. I don't think this is essential. I mentioned that I thought the gameplay with the streams could be good. I think that I should clarify that is only with extensive tweaking. I think it's the only thing that had the most potential. But otherwise, I don't really think anything about this game was particularly fun. Gonna pass.
Okay, and then following in second place, that would be me. I clearly don't know that much about the Ghostbusters. So I will say that, this game is a very bizarre, somehow interesting approach to a Ghostbusters video game. It's definitely not even on like the top 5 ways I would have imagined making a Ghostbusters game. But I can't help feel that an action platformer version where you start at the New York Public Library as like level 1, and then there's like a boss ghost at the end of each level, kind of like Castlevania, and you work your way all the way up to the fight at the top against the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I think that would have just been more appreciated by everyone. People who actually bought the game, people who were fans of the series, people who are fans of video games. Like, I feel like that would have connected a lot better than what we actually got here. So this is not essential for me. Sean?
Yeah, this game is 100% not essential, but in terms of like the experiences that I have to go through for any given episode of this podcast, I would say that I at least enjoyed talking about this much more than a lot of the games that we've talked about recently, whether they be just games based on game shows or just shmups. Like, at least this was a new concepts being explored, and then they dropped the flashlight and fell to their death in a cave. But this was entertaining to at least talk about. So for that, I give it big ups, but still unessential.
Okay, and I think that's what you have again. One thing I will say is we're all good sports about bad NES games. We can find the silver lining somewhere, and I feel like the only games that I've ever played on this system that I couldn't understand why they were ever made was Stack Up and Urban Champion. But only Urban Champion because that's like a game Nintendo still likes to this day. And it's like, really?
I forgot about Urban Champion.
To this day? So those are the two that confuse me. Next week, we have Joust, the game that's kind of like Balloon Fight, so I don't know if we need it, but we're going to play it because we play every single one in chronological order. Hey, that's the premise of the show. Guys, anything to say before we sign off here?
I got nothing.
Okay, I like that. Sean?
Eat your marshmallows.
All right, eat your marshmallows. Stay puffed, everybody out there, okay? And I'm Michael Esposito. You can find me at Esposito Film on Twitter. You can find Nostalgia at NostalgiaCast on Twitter. You can also just try to find us anywhere in real life. Good luck.
We're
home. Hiding.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say good luck. That you don't want to taunt the wrong person. Anyway, that's all the time we have for this episode. See you guys next Friday for Joust. Bye.